We have some breaking news regarding PSA. They have apparently, their parent collectors has acquired SGC. This is insane to me, especially with what the information looks like to date. This was broken by Darren Ravel, who's broken a few big stories now. And what he talks about is the fact that Collectors has acquired SGC. And apparently for the time being, both brands are going to live separately, i.e. there's going to be a PSA brand and then also an SGC brand. Now, straight off the bat, this seems pretty wild to me, especially, this statement here from Darren, because it just doesn't make sense to operate like that. We sort of saw CGC and CSG try and operate in two paths, one for TCG, one for sports cards, and it didn't really work, right? The branding was confusing. And I can imagine down the line, the same sort of thing is going to happen with SGC. I think it sort of makes sense from PSA's perspective. They want to expand, they want to get more experienced graders. So, the easy way to do that is to bring in, a competitor. By a competitor, all of a sudden you have all their facilities, all their, tools that they use for sonic sealing and all that kind of stuff. You've got experienced graders that can now be, brought over. And then the common sense would be to get all that sort of stuff and then combine the brand, right? Expand and grow. It's a bit odd. I don't see how this can work, long term, having two separate ones, but let's sort of see what happens. There's a lot more questions that I have as well regarding, what this means for things like PSA's guarantee. Does this now mean that the SGC slabs are going to fall under that guarantee, right? SGC don't have an explicit guarantee over their grading like we've talked before. And by that, I mean, they don't really stand by their grade. Like they'll make an exception here and there, but their policy says nothing about how you're protected if they've made a mistake. PSA does. So does that mean now SGC slabs are covered as well? We need to sort of wait and see. We need to sort of wait and see whether or not this actually gets confirmed by the businesses. But I'd like to think that Darren is talking about it, so he's got definitive proof. But I'm really keen to hear what you guys have to say, because this is pretty wild. I was basically playing the new Final Fantasy VII game, turned off my game to quickly record a video for tomorrow that you're going to see after this one, obviously, and saw this, and my mind is obviously a bit blown. So I'm going to sit on this. I wanted to quickly come to you all in case you hadn't seen it and share my initial thoughts. I'll probably do another video in a few days' time, but it's just a pretty wild one. Like, I think, this sort of makes sense from PSA because they are the biggest and they want to remain the biggest. So it makes sense to go after their second biggest competitor, i.e. SGC being bigger than both BGS and CGC, per my understanding, I think via the latest gem rate data. So it makes sense for all those benefits that you can get off the back of it that I mentioned a little bit earlier. But, the whole operating under the two brands thing is a bit weird. What does this mean now for the vintage card market? One, I think, interesting play might be that if, PSA does absorb SGC, does this mean that, prior graded SGC vintage cards are going to maintain a premium? Because people obviously trust SGC quite a lot when it comes to, their opinion over vintage cards, right? There's the reason why they sort of have that market share. So, the fact that SGC has been acquired, yes, the same employees are going to be carried over, but will PSA's standards and policies make people less comfortable sending their vintage cards there? Does that mean, like I said, the older vintage cards are going to maintain a premium? I think they might. And, I've talked to some examples in the past around CGC from a comic book perspective. Their older labeled books typically, command a higher premium because they're a lot stricter back then. So maybe the same sort of thing happens with SGC. A lot to unpack. Let me know your instant thoughts down below. This is just wild to me. My gut feeling would be that they're going to basically cannibalize the SGC brand, take everything and combine it into PSA eventually. I'm not sure why, or I don't understand the logic behind wanting to keep separate brands. I think, I quickly saw a bit of Neo's live stream and he had Carlos on there, and Carlos basically said, well, you've seen this happen with airlines, you've seen this happen with beer companies. They own multiple things and they keep operating, independently of each other. But, for grading, I don't think that makes sense. I don't think, you can have two separate brands competing against each other for grading cards and think that, people are going to be all happy about it. I think it makes more sense just to consolidate everything in one. I guess maybe the counterpoint to that, thinking out loud now, is that if PSA are maybe concerned about, okay, let's say they get rid of the SGC brand, they combine everything into PSA, does that mean they now lose the vintage card market for the reasons I mentioned earlier? Does that mean vintage cards now go to, CSG? Does that mean vintage cards now go to someone else like Tag? Who knows? But, let me know your thoughts down below and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.